we'll start off by actually inviting you to introduce yourself. So, who are you, and why do you think you are here in this conversation? So, Darren, how about we start with yourself and then we'll go to Chris?
Thank you very much, Sarah. My name is Darren Lamb. I am traditionally an executive producer who has moved into the sustainability space. I've been working very closely with Sarah, Chris, and the team on the documentary that launched today. Why I'm here, I think, is to share my experience and my knowledge of the last, I think, 4 or 5 months, I think it is now, of putting this project together and some learnings from that. And yeah, it's the journey that's taken, really.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Darren. Absolutely. Chris, how about yourself? Who are you and why are you here?
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Stocky. I am the climate change and nature lead at Stala, but also wear the hat of Vector Project Manager. So that is the project that you've seen the documentary for being circulated and was released today. But before that, back in my days of being an academic and doing my PhD, which was in fossils, although sometimes we do say it was in geosciences, I was also involved in a major blue chip documentary through that, and I've always been interested in science communication. So, here to share my perspectives on collaborating effectively to make sure that science doesn't get stuck in an academic sphere and makes its way out to different stakeholders to have that impact.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So Darren, having waltzed into this world of making our documentary. So, I mean, we first started talking about this, what, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that.
Christmas, Boxing Day. I think it might have actually been Boxing Day or the day after.
So there
Yeah,
we go.
probably.
Okay, so let's call it 5.5 months.
Yeah.
Let's go with that in terms of the documentary that was released at 1 o'clock this afternoon. So that was 1 o'clock on the 1st of May. That seemed a bit auspicious. In terms of coming into the creation of this documentary, this was something where if it had been left up to, say, Chris and myself, so two scientists, I think we would have had a very different product. And instead, what you brought to the table was that amazing world of TV and film. Do you want to just describe what it was like reaching out to your world, and that introduction that was made to the world of science and research?
Yeah, I think it was an amazing opportunity, first and foremost. I hadn't experienced a project like this exactly before, as in a science communication piece, but stylized and created for a popular, wider audience, really. So it was really interesting. The way I sort of went about it was to sort of get a bit of an idea of the different kind of styles and the different kind of teams that could potentially put this together with us. So I went down a sort of classic commercials and content route. I went down a big sort of corporate broadcast PR type route, and I also went down a more traditional factor entertainment TV route. And that's really, as we know, that's where we sort of felt more comfortable. I think the style that was we discussed with that particular team resonated with the audience that we wanted to reach, and it was a great mechanic really for translating quite complex science data into something that's quite palatable to a wider audience, not only on screen, but on the day of the shoot as well, at the event. So I think we made the right choice there.
And just with that, just to, I guess, it kind of explain it in more detail. So this was a case where we thought, okay, we have this concept, and the concept was, let's invite a viewer to come and take part in a social science study where we're asking 100 volunteers what they think about different aspects of raw materials. And so it was a case of how do you welcome that viewer into a study? And I think, as you were describing there, we took a look at a variety of different methods of doing or styles of doing it. We landed up with the kind of the TV style, so something that you might find on the BBC or Channel 4 or something like that. But we did look at some other styles as well, like a slightly more artsy
We did.
worlds. Do
Yeah.
you want to describe that in a bit more detail?
Yeah, to be honest, I think you could have done it in so many different exciting, interesting ways. It does come down to the audience, I think, that we wanted to reach. That was a big key thing. For example, we could have done the sort of high-end, really glossy, sort of commercial looking piece. It could have been a big white psych studio, and quite a, sort of a bare set. The other way we were looking at was building a really complicated set in a warehouse and things like that. And I think when the opportunity to come up to work with the Natural History Museum and use the incredible space of the Hints Hall, it just felt right. And I think that's where it sort of landed. Like, yes, this is where it needs to be. It's got the right context, it's got popularity, people know where it is, they understand it. And I think that was one of the key things for me when looking at the different options about why we should do it in such a style, in such a way.
And just with that as well, Darren, and before I move on to Chris, in terms of working out where does somebody's suggestion or creative input end and then the space for somebody else's to come in on that start? I think that was really interesting because it was a case where it was almost the scientists came up with the idea and then went, okay, come on, creative people, what do you
Yeah.
reckon? But it was really interesting in terms of that kind of fuzzy zone in the middle where everyone was being very polite with one another,
Yes.
not wanting to step on one another's toes. So especially if we go all the way back to the beginning of just the style. So what style did we want for the
Yeah.
documentary? Do you have any comments on, I guess, people being polite with one another?
I think I think the best thing from a collaboration point of view is mutual respect and understanding of different worlds meeting. My background, I've done sort of 20 odd years in TV and commercials, and every project's different. You're privileged. One of the reasons I do what I do is that you're incredibly privileged to step into a world you'd never have access to or be involved with and spend maybe a couple of weeks or a couple of months, or in this case, 5 months in that world, understanding it, trying to make sense of it, and then produce something that will hopefully resonate with viewers and do the job it's designed to do. So I think it's coming in early is really important. I think everyone understanding each other's skill sets and knowledge. And you're absolutely right. It's important to be polite. However, there has to be a hierarchy in decision makers. Otherwise, we were working to a very tight deadline of about 5 or 6 weeks, I think it was in the end, something like that. So decisions had to be made, and I think, it worked really well, and the best decisions were made ultimately, for the best of the documentary, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Darren. Chris, I know that you've been obviously deeply involved in the documentary itself, but before that, once upon a time, you were one of the scientific advisors on a very large, high-profile production. Do you want to talk about what it was like being that science advisor into that world of creatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was, as Sarah has just explained, an advisor on a major documentary called Life on Our Planet. It's a Netflix series. It was at the time, it may still be, I'm not sure, the largest spend on a TV series ever for a documentary. It was 14.2 million. I was meant to, so this was my version of Rose's internship. I went and worked on that and spent another 2 months advising them. Um, I'd never stepped foot in that world before, so I came at it from an academic perspective, and a month turned into accidentally being in charge of assets worth in excess of £100,000, and making the shots as to what they should look like. It was absolutely terrifying, but I think actually Darren just highlighted that immediate input and respect for it and listening to those different perspectives. And that was really key in trying to have, what should a woolly mammoth's hair look like? Trying to have quite a detailed scientific conversation about that, but within the boundaries of a documentary. So it's not, is it 100% perfect? It's, does it tell the story accurately enough for somebody to buy into this narrative and journey with, integrity? But also then there being a hierarchy of communication. So I never spoke to the SFX team that produced the assets that I was advising on, despite that, me being the person accountable for them in some respects. That went through, a multitude of different teams talking to each other. So kind of a scaled up version, but with the same principles underlying.
And with that then, Chris, so then taking that experience and coming into the world of this documentary that we were making, just need to add, to make this very clear, we did not spend 14.2 million on the
Mm.
28-minute documentary that you can watch for free on YouTube at this precise second in time. Our budget was slightly lower than that. But Chris, was there anything that I guess surprised you or delighted you in terms of the collaboration that we had with Big Circus, who are the filmmakers that we brought in to work with us on this?
I think I think what surprised me actually is that everything worked as you would like it to and should be in many ways. There was respect for understanding what the end goal was, which is to take an academic concept or a detailed scientific construct and bring it down to what's pertinent and what's necessary. And I think that's where a lot of the communication of science fails, is that we get stuck in the details. We know that there's a difference between these two words, and that, frankly, they're normally what you've built your career on, is the difference between those two words. So letting go of the difference of those two words in the production of documentaries is so hard. Um, but just that respect and desire to learn from one another. And I think that was, I wish it wasn't unique about the team that was assembled on this documentary, but I think that it can be unique. We had the joy of working with a great production company, and we had a great team on our end working on it, all of whom who wanted to, yeah, enter that arena of collaboration and trust rather than say it's my way or the highway. I've had experiences with other production companies where that is not the case. I've had experience with other academic groups where that is not the case. So surprisingly, it just worked seamlessly as you would want it to.
Well, I'm glad that's what it looked like to you, Chris. That's no, of course it was a great thing. Darren, from your perspective though, because you were often that bridge between the world of science and then the world of TV, etc. What were some of your big frustrations?
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that one.
You can twist the question. It's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I I think for me, as I said before, you have to adapt very quickly into the situation you're placed in as a producer and a storyteller. Um, I think from a frustration point of view, you are not to really have them unless it's people sort of, dropping out or something on the night. My biggest fear, honestly, was we had 100 people coming into the space on the evening for the filming. We had 4 or 5 hours to actually do it. Are they going to turn up? That's the thing. Are they actually going to be there? That was a really big thing for me. So that wasn't a frustration. It was probably the biggest concern. But I think the other thing is to slightly be aware of is that TV and production usually works incredibly fast. It's very high paced. It's very intense. It works outside of normal hours quite a lot. So I think sometimes when, some of the science was, took a bit longer because obviously you wanted to get it accurate, you wanted to make sure it was robust, all the things that absolutely has to happen from a science perspective. That takes a bit of realignment to make sure that everyone's going at the same pace and in the same direction, I think. But frustrations, I think I think we incredibly lucked out on the team is a big thing as well. I think that it was a great team. It's lovely people.
God, we're all being very polite, aren't we? No,
We
it
are.
was. It was. I think as well, though, if we were to do this again,
Yeah.
so let's say that we go back in time. It is Boxing Day
I've got
2024.
my hat on, Christmas hat. Yeah.
You got your Christmas hat on, you're feeling, kind of, you've had all that lovely food and everything, all of that kind of stuff. And we were about to do this again. I think from a personal perspective,
Mm.
I probably do more homework in terms of what is the process flow that a production company actually needs to follow in terms of making the documentary.
Yep.
I would probably have it clearer in my head in terms of what were those really key crunch points
Yeah.
and everything that was needed for it.
Yeah.
And then be able to work backwards again into that science to say, oh, but hang on a second, that date's just not going to work because we're going to need a number of weeks to
Yeah.
crunch the data or to do X, Y, Z. So I think
100%.
that kind of, sort of key learnings is almost before we'd even started is really get that kind of
Yeah.
timeline or that process a bit tighter. Is that fair, do you think?
Yeah, I think to build on that point, I think looking back in hindsight, what would have, I think, really helped, and it would help every future production, I think, a line like this, is for almost like science training for producers in the
Mm,
first week. It's a day, a mutual day of understanding each other, understanding the way we all work. So it would be it'd be a day spent together. It would be workshops or briefing for the scientists to share what the entirety of the project, its milestones, the schedules, all those kind of things exactly. And again, from the other side, for producers to, again, as you say, mark the points that they would need, so it all aligns to go into smoothly. I think that was a big key learning for me. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that kind of, in a way, that sort of science training for the producers, but then also production training for the
yeah,
scientists. So that kind of that two-way learning and almost leaning into some of the discussions we had a couple of days ago with Erica, where she was saying something that worked really nicely when they were writing the Critical Raw Materials Act was that everybody knew what one another were bringing to the
mm,
table. So that allowed them to work much, much faster. And I think yeah, that's certainly something that we've learned now. I don't think we know everything about one another, but we've learned a lot more.
we
Um,
have.
so I guess with this, in terms of that science communication, so Chris, maybe coming across to yourself, the way in which the we've tried to get the documentary to tell that story, tell that story, share that story is instead of telling people science. So this is then going with that collaboration almost with the viewer or with the person who's watching the documentary. The traditional way of doing it is to tell people. And I think this is again big kudos to Hershey, who's one of the architects behind all of this, is instead of telling somebody something, actually encourage people to critically think about something. And so therefore they come to the conclusions themselves. This is quite a big twist on how science communication usually works. Do you have any thoughts or feelings on that?
Yeah, I think it's a big twist. It's a change, and yet it so shouldn't be. It's almost like I think there's trying to think about quite how to phrase it, but the education system and the way we communicate has become very factoid based or prescription based for the last 3 decades. And it's now coming back to learning critical thinking skills and basically allowing people to be inquisitive. Because if you tell everyone a bunch of facts really quickly, you don't want to go away and find out more. The whole point, and you know this, Sarah, is good facilitation is to leave somebody wanting to carry on the journey on their own. And I think that that's been so lost in science communication because, and we've all spoken a lot about this, the way that the funding systems work for it is you normally get one shot at this. Maybe in your career to do something like this, not a year, 1 in 5 researchers get to be a part of this ever. So you want to get everything in it. You want to throw every bit of information you know at your audience. And that's the way often to turn them off rather than engage somebody in what do you think? Let's go on a little bit of a journey. What do you think again? And then here's how you can carry on your journey if you want to. And if you don't want to, that's fine because it's my passion project. Maybe it's not yours. I'm sure you'll engage with somebody else's. Um, so truly unique, but what we need to get back to. And there are some nice other outputs like the Green Deals game from Vector that again have iterated in that way and they get that to come through too.
Yeah. So I think just to finish off with this, there are some really good questions that are coming through in the chat in terms of that kind of, some of the responses to the documentary. And I think this is where the documentary is just one component part in a much larger system of what is that learning that's being shared and explored, etc. But I think, Darren, just to finish with yourself, so the question that's come in from Lucy. So have we had any feedback from the people who have participated or like some of the volunteers who participated in it? And of course, we met a lot of them. We did a pre-screening last week because we thought it only polite to show them the documentary first before it went live. And I know you were speaking to a lot of those volunteers and those participants. Did you get any feedback from them?
I think it's a little bit flippant, but I think no one's ever going to look at toothpaste quite the same way again. As Richard Professor Harrington told us about what was actually in toothpaste. I think it was a real. They had the people that I spoke to. I knew probably around five, maybe five people who were part of the 100, and I had a very similar experience to them. We had our eyes opened. We really did. It's one of those things that you just don't consider how raw materials are absolutely integral to our entire way of life. And I think they all really enjoyed having that experience and then being the person who can then share that information with people. I think it's a really special thing to do.
I agree, Darren. And I think actually, sorry, there's just a really good question that's coming from Alex in the Q&A. And Alex asks, what is the biggest thing science types can learn from the film and TV industry to effectively communicate their results or information? Darren, what do you reckon? And then I'll go to Chris.
Okay, I'm going to say broader, inclusive accessibility. It's basically science content. It's got to resonate with a big, wide audience rather than specialist audiences. That's the key. It's like if your friend who's not a scientist or not in academia won't watch it, don't make it like that. Make it so the people, your neighbors, your friends are interested. Use all the skills and the tools that TV have been using for the last 50 years, 60 years. Use that to get your audience, draw them into your message and your project and get the results and communication that you want.
Brilliant. Thank you, Darren. And I think to that as well, if you are the scientist, listen to the person who has the TV brain. And even if they tell you that your thing is boring and something that you think is boring is really interesting, still listen to them because they probably have a point. That's one of my big learnings from this. Chris, what about yourself?
I was going to say leave your ego at the door, and but don't let perfect get in the way of the good enough. And I think that's what Darren's saying. Don't wax lyrical about your tiny detail. Think about the big messaging, thinking about that first wave of information that will make the ripples in people's own learning. Don't try and do that all for them. It'll turn them off.
Brilliant. So with that, thank you so, so much, Darren and Chris. Lovely to see you
Thank
both.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Round of
you.
applause. Excellent.